Hi, I'm Egg, and this is the Eggshells channel. Um, there's a story behind that, and I'll get to that one of these days. But you may have seen me on my daughter's YouTube channel doing some unboxing videos with her. She has a lot of fun doing those. I'll link to her channel down below if you're interested in checking it out. Um, but I am an editor by trade. I like to write. I've been blogging for, I'd say, the last 12 or 13 years. And I don't really get a lot of feedback or a lot of traffic. Not that I'm looking to become famous and get lots of likes and subscriptions and comments, but shouting into the wind gets a little old after a while. For me, this is just a little bit of fun. I thought I might take one of my interests and hobbies and try to turn it into a YouTube channel and see if anyone's interested. So I wanted to talk about religion and spirituality in particular, and also Bible translations. As I said, I work with words for a living. And one of the things I find really interesting about different Bible translations is that it's just the nuances, the difference choosing one word or one phrase over another can make in the way you understand a particular passage. Now, I was raised Catholic. I was a cradle Catholic, and I had a lot of questions growing up, questions that the grown-ups around me were either unwilling or unable to answer. And that kind of sent me on a journey around the world, spiritually speaking. And I learned a lot, and came back, I guess, came back home after many years away, probably close to a 20-year round trip. But I was able to come back to where I started with a new appreciation for the teachings. See, I've never been much of a literalist. And I think that's where I got hung up. I don't know. I seem to lack the gift of faith. But at the same time, religion and spirituality fascinate me. I think religion is a net good for society. Carl Jung actually had a lot to do with my return back home. I was just able to process the teachings in a different light, in a way that I find beneficial. And so, I mean, part of my journey even went through Protestantism, and I don't know, that just didn't really do it for me either. And I'm not knocking anyone's particular beliefs. It's not what I'm here to do. I just thought it would be interesting to talk about someone's kind of eclectic spiritual journey, and mine certainly has been eclectic. And also, like I said, just because I work with words, I'm really interested in Bible translations. It may surprise a lot of people to know that there are quite a few different Catholic Bible translations out there. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15, I believe, available these days. Most of them not very well known. In fact, I found it interesting. I saw a survey recently. I think it was just a compilation of how many Bibles were sold annually, and I think these are the figures from 2023. The King James made up about a third of all U.S. sales. And right after that was the New International Version, which is a popular Protestant translation of the Bible. And you didn't get to a Catholic Bible until the New American Bible, probably the Revised Edition, which is what's being used right now. It's being used in the lectionary in the United States. But that only made up something like 2 to 4% of all Bibles sold. And that's, according to the sales statistics, the most popular Catholic Bible. So we're talking about a very small sample size here. There are a lot of people on YouTube who talk about Protestant Bible translations, and that's great. So I figured I'd do something a little bit different, because there is some talk about Catholic Bibles on YouTube, but not a whole lot. I'm not a scholar of the original languages. I don't know Hebrew or Greek or Aramaic. And that's one reason I like having a lot of different translations at hand, because the more you look at different translations, the more you can see, I guess you can get a sense of what the original meaning must have been, because you get a wider range of meanings and translations, and after a while you get a sense of, okay, I think this is what they were going for. And I really enjoy doing that. And I'm looking over here next to me. I've got a bookshelf. See, this is my attic space that's filled with all my religion and spirituality books. So this is something I've been studying for a long time. These are the books that basically didn't fit anywhere else in our house, so I kind of confiscated our attic space. You're looking at a very small part of it. I've got, and it looks like a little studio apartment up here. It's kind of crazy. I've got a day bed over on the other side and a kind of a little chapel meditation area. Um, I'm looking, if you could see behind me right now, I've got 3 pictures of Mother Mary on the wall facing the window, to give you a little bit of an idea of where my spiritual mindset is, I suppose. So yeah, there are a lot of different Catholic Bible translations out there, and I thought I would maybe take this opportunity to see if anyone's interested to go through some of my collection, because I'd like to share some of it, and just to maybe educate people, particularly Catholics, about what their options are out there if they're looking for a good Bible translation, because there are Bibles that translate things word for word very formally. There are some that translate more thought for thought. They're called dynamic translations, where you get, I guess, more of an approximation. And some people like the more formal because it's closer to the original, but those can be a little harder to read sometimes, because the English sometimes isn't as idiomatic, since they're trying to stay as close to the original as possible. It really comes down to personal taste, honestly. And I think there's something to be said for both approaches. In fact, out of the Bible translations, the Catholic Bible translations that I've read, and there are quite a few, I would say that my 2 favorites are this one here is the Ignatius Bible, Revised Standard Version, Second Catholic Edition. This is a very good formal translation, based on the Protestant RSV that came out, in the 50s, and then it's been revised a couple of times since then. There was a revised Catholic edition, and then the second revision came out, I believe, I would have to look in the book, but I think around 2006, the mid-2000s. So among the more formal Bible translations, Catholic translations, I really like that one. And among more dynamic translations, if you can see over my shoulder here, all this is a collection of Jerusalem Bibles from 1966. There have been a couple of revisions of the Jerusalem Bible over the years. And when I talk about 12 to 15 different Catholic translations, I'm counting all those different ones as separate translations, because in a sense they really are. The Jerusalem Bible was modeled on a French translation of the Bible done in the 50s. This came out in 66, and it has a very nice literary flow to it. It's in a single column format, which I think makes it read more like a book. It's got copious study notes, which really help you understand what you're reading. And fun fact, J.R.R. Tolkien was one of the contributing editors. He worked on the Book of Jonah. I think he was supposed to, it was planned for him to work on more of the Jerusalem Bible, but I think other commitments got in the way. But that gives you an idea of what they were going for in the translation. I think they were looking for a more literary, almost poetic kind of flow to the Bible. And I think they succeeded. It's very fun to read. And, you wouldn't think that with the Bible necessarily. It can be kind of some of the passages in the Old Testament especially can be a kind of a drudgery to get through, honestly. So, that's just 2 of many examples. I have a King James with Apocrypha. I won't buy, I have some Protestant Bibles just because I'm curious to see how they translate certain passages, but what I focus on are either Catholic Bibles or Bibles with Apocrypha. And if you don't know the difference between Catholic Bibles and regular Bibles, quote unquote, is that basically the only difference, more or less, is that the Catholic Bible has 7 extra books in the Old Testament. In the ancient Christian church, there was no Bible as we know it now. People would read scrolls. They'd read Paul's letters, things like that. But they didn't have like a set lectionary or a canon like we do now. And so the Catholic Bible kind of goes back to those old days when there wasn't, I guess, an agreed upon canon set in place. And the grouping of books that the Catholic Church, as it took form, the grouping of books that they kind of coalesced around included 73 books, which includes those 7 extra books in the Old Testament, plus some additions to the books of Daniel and Esther. And pretty much all Bibles contained the 73 book canon um, until I'd say around the early to mid 19th century, when um, a lot of publishers started taking those extra books out. Um, and those were the Protestant translations that took those out. That kind of goes back to Martin Luther when he started the Reformation. He put those extra 7 books in like a separate section of his Luther Bible because he thought that they were good for reading, but he didn't think that they rose to the level of sacred scripture. And so after a while, there was, I guess, a lot of people started to think of those extra books as not necessary. And so, honestly, for printing considerations, as far as I understand, they started to get taken out of a lot of Bibles. And so you ended up with Protestant Bibles that have 66 books. Catholic Bible has 73. Some Eastern Orthodox canons have even more. And again, that goes back to the old days when there was no set canon. So the Eastern churches had even more books than the Catholics do, and still do. The Oriental Orthodox, the Ethiopians have 81 books in their Bible, believe it or not. So I just find that interesting from a historical perspective. I also find the apocryphal books, or as the Catholics call them, deuterocanonical books, I find them interesting because most of them were written in the time between the Old and New Testament. And so you kind of get a snapshot of how Hellenism was having an influence on Judaism. You get to the New Testament and everyone's talking about like hell. They just assume it always existed. But in the Old Testament, you have people talking about Sheol as kind of a shadowy underworld where everybody goes when they die, but there's not a lot of talk of heaven and hell and things like that. Everything is very this world centered. And, there's obviously a shift in between there. And those books in between give you a little bit of a taste of what happened in between. I also like them personally because Sophia, the personified wisdom of God, takes on a pretty prominent role in a couple of the books in the Deuterocanons, particularly the books of Wisdom and Sirach, and a little bit more in the book of Baruch. You see her in the standard Bible, quote unquote, in the book of Proverbs and a little bit in the book of Job, but that character gets fleshed out a lot more. I'll talk about that probably a lot more as, if this channel goes on. And, I think it's important to have wisdom. You need wisdom to really understand what these books teach you, what the Bible teaches you, what religion in general has to teach you. And when you read the Sophian passages in Scripture, they say just that. You seek wisdom and you gain understanding. So yeah, that's, for many reasons, that's a very important part of Scripture to me. I also find the Bible fascinating from a historical perspective. It tells you a lot about the ancient world and how people related to each other. It shows you how a specific culture tried to answer the big questions, which we're still wrestling with as human beings. So, and I think there are a lot of valuable lessons to be learned in those ancient stories, in a lot of cases metaphorically, but not in all cases. I mean, the Sermon on the Mount for me is like the pinnacle of the entire Bible. If I could only have one part of the Bible and the rest of it went away, I would want those 3 chapters of Matthew to stick around. But yeah, from a historical perspective, I think it's a fascinating read. And also, this is the foundation of Western civilization. You find it in mainly the books of Genesis, a little bit in Exodus, but the idea that people have inherent worth because they're created in the divine image comes from this book. And the foundational values of our countries and our culture come from this book. It doesn't mean that we are a theocracy. It just means that our system, our values, and our culture were grounded in those ideas that came from this book. I think just from a perspective of historical literacy, I think it's important for people to know what's in the Bible. Honestly, I don't think a lot of people who consider themselves Christians know what's in the Bible. And, that's kind of tragic. I read a statistic recently that said that something like only 9% of self-professed Christians worldwide have actually read the Bible cover to cover. I mean, this is like the book that your religion is founded on. Why would you not want to take the time to read through it? Now I'm on my third read through right now, and a lot of my interest in it right now comes from the fact that I started out this year kind of just spontaneously deciding to read through the Bible for what I believe is the third time in my life, but it's been like 20 years plus since the last time I've done it. And this time is the first time I'm reading it with some help, and that's from Father Mike Schmitz, who does the Bible in a Year podcast. And so I'm following along with him, and it's helping. It's helping me get through some of the passages that I think otherwise I'd really struggle with. I still do struggle with a lot of them. I guess, not from a perspective of just trying to understand them, but from a perspective of, some of the Old Testament stories are so violent, and it's hard to square that sometimes with the God of love of Christianity. And I want the Bible to, I guess, to read from a Catholic perspective, but to me, the Bible reads like the Calvinists read it. And I guess that's something I'll have to get into more as the channel goes on as well. But the way I read passages about election and predestination, and just the fact that a supreme deity would know everything and be all powerful, and so you have an unavoidable situation where a deity would know the outcome of your life before you're even born, and that creates a kind of a sticky situation in my mind philosophically. And so that's, I guess, maybe one reason I've never been able to take a lot of this stuff on a literal level. I have to understand it in a different way, or else I can't make it work for myself. Good or bad, that's what it is. But Father Mike is a lot of fun to listen to, and he's just so, guys, you got to listen to this passage. He's so excited about what he's doing, and it makes you really, I guess, excited, interested in reading the Bible, because you can feel his enthusiasm coming through. So, I like Father Mike's approach to the faith, but I guess among contemporary Catholics right now, I'm really drawn to Bishop Robert Barron, and the way he approaches the faith. He comes at it from a more philosophical perspective, where you have Father Mike, who's just kind of right in the moment, and, oh, guys, this is so exciting. Bishop Barron is more, Thomas Aquinas would have said this, and he said it in Latin, and he said it in this obscure volume from, 5,000 years ago. Obviously not that, but it's just the kind of the way he approaches. I like his philosophical approach, so I'm not, bagging on him. I like him a lot. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with my perspective on Catholicism and the Bible in particular. But the reason the person of Sophia is important to me is because she represents wisdom, and she represents the sacred feminine in another sense. And I think we need more of that yin-yang balance between male and female. We have an all-male trinity, so where does the sacred feminine fit in? They're out of my reach right now, but I've got a whole section over here of different translations of the Tao Te Ching. My wife considers herself a philosophical Taoist. Taoism was part of my around the world spiritual religious journey, and it affected me a lot when I read the Tao Te Ching. I'd say it's probably my favorite book in the world. But you learn a lot about yin and yang philosophy when you're reading about the Tao Te Ching. Just how it's important to have a balance of complementary opposites to create harmony and balance in the universe. And I think that applies everywhere in life, spiritual and otherwise. And so, we have an all-male trinity in the Christian tradition. It wasn't always that way. There were some early traditions that thought of the Holy Spirit as feminine, and I think there's probably a good case to be made for that. But again, that's something to talk about in future episodes. So yeah, there are people who, I guess, they don't understand a lot about Catholicism, and I guess I'd like to hopefully address some of those issues as time goes on. I don't necessarily want to be a Catholic apologist, because I don't agree with everything that the Catholic Church teaches, but I mean, I understand what they teach and why they teach it. One of the things I like about the Church is that it's very internally consistent philosophically. And I think there's a benefit to understanding that. I grew up in the post-Vatican II Church when catechesis was pretty bad, and I don't think it's gotten much better. And I think we have a lot of people today who just don't know much about their faith. Churches are emptying out everywhere. And I hear a lot about how Catholics, in particular, are being kind of lured away toward more like evangelical churches. Those are the ones who even stick around, religion. But I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that people don't really understand what their own church teaches. I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but it is true for a lot. And I know from personal experience because I was part of that post-Vatican II generation. I was born in 1971, so I mean, just like literally a year or two after the church switched to the vernacular. And I mean, there were wild overcorrections in the name of ecumenism back then. I can remember, I tell this story all the time, Mary statues being shoved into closets. No, not a rosary in sight. I got a rosary from a sweet old nun for my confirmation, like a little gift. I had no idea what to do with it because no one ever showed me how to pray a rosary. So that's the kind of church I grew up in the 70s and 80s. The felt banners and the guitar masses. Our particular church got into the charismatic Catholic movement pretty heavily. And so sometimes we looked as Pentecostal as we did Catholic. So it was, and my grandparents who adopted and raised me were Protestant converts. So I mean, there was just a lot of mixed messaging for me growing up. And that's probably maybe why I had a lot of questions. Or maybe I'm just a skeptical person. I don't know. But anyway, I'd like to address a little bit of that as time goes on and the channel goes on. I think one thing, because I'm probably going to focus a lot on Bibles and Bible translations, maybe a little bit of Bible history, is trying to foster an understanding among people that the Catholic Bible is basically the same Bible Protestants have, just with the 7 extra books. I mean, that's really the only difference. And, I say that because I frequently see people commenting online that, oh, Catholics changed this and that in the Bible, and they really didn't. You can compare any Catholic book, any Catholic Bible I've got here to a Protestant Bible, and you're going to have the same chapters and verses and the same books. The Catholics just have the extra books. I hear a lot of people saying things like, well, Catholics took out the second commandment because they worship statues, which Catholics don't, but it's a pretty common misunderstanding. But pick up any Catholic Bible, turn to Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. The commandment against idolatry is right there. So that's something, stuff like that I'd like to maybe talk about as the channel goes on. So I guess that's about it. I just wanted to say hi and kind of put this video out there and try to gauge interest in talking about Catholicism from somebody, I guess, who isn't a conventional Catholic in a lot of ways, but still appreciates the church and the church's teachings. And then to also talk about Catholic Bibles and Bible translations that really don't get a lot of attention. I've got a lot of old cool books, a lot of like these are all from the 60s and early 70s. I've got a bunch of different versions of the New American Bible, the original edition that came out around 70, 71. And they're just a neat snapshot in time. They're from that same spirit of ecumenism. A lot of the Bibles that were published back then did have very loose translations. And then you see revisions of those same Bibles coming along in subsequent years that become more formal in their translation philosophy. So, again, maybe I think in some cases you had even Bible translators who were like overcorrecting in the direction of dynamic translation. And so they had to kind of come back and find a middle ground. But I don't think all those dynamic translations were bad. The original New American Bible, it's a serviceable translation. It's not great. It's not going to win any literary awards, but it's okay. I know a lot of people have a beef with the study notes. Those actually got worse with the revisions. The notes in the New American Bible, the original, I don't think are too bad. But the notes in the Jerusalem Bible, they're really good. They give you a mix of kind of historical critical scholarship, which the NAB really focuses on, I think, to an extreme. But they balance it with, I guess, theological, devotional kind of understanding of the scriptures to help you understand things from a faith point of view as well. So I think it just strikes a nice balance. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about. And thanks for watching, and we'll see where things go. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.